I never imagined retirement would come with this much drama. For most of my life, I dreamed of one simple thing: peace. I worked 37 years at a manufacturing company, clocking in at 6 every morning, working my hands raw and saving every penny. I didn't want a mansion or a flashy car. All I ever wanted was a quiet cabin by the lake where I could fish, sip coffee at sunrise, and watch the seasons roll by with my wife Ellen. Finally, after years of saving and sacrifice, we made it happen. The cabin was small, but to us, it was paradise. Pinewood walls, a porch that creaked under your boots, and a private dock that stretched into the still water. It's the kind of place where loons call in the morning and the air smells like freedom. But paradise has a way of attracting snakes. From the moment we moved in, I knew our neighborhood HOA was trouble. The so-called queen bee of the area was Margaret Wallace, though everyone behind her back called her Karen. And let me tell you, if there were ever a woman who fit the title, it was her. Fake blonde curls, sunglasses bigger than her. Face pearls even when she was watering her plants. She strutted around like she owned every inch of land within a mile of the lake. Her husband was nowhere to be seen most of the time. Rumor had it he traveled for business. But everyone whispered that he'd really just found excuses to stay away from her. But she had a son, Trevor. And Trevor was worse. Spoiled, entitled, and mean. Trevor was the kind of kid who thought the world owed him. 17 years. Old, driving a brand new truck his mom bought him. Walking around with his chest puffed out like a rooster. He wasn't a boy anymore, but not a man either, and he made sure everyone knew he was Margaret Wallace's son, Margaret maid. Sure, everyone treated him like royalty. The trouble started one Friday evening in early spring. The ice had just melted off the lake, and Ellen and I were sitting on the porch with mugs of cocoa, enjoying the kind of cool evening that makes you grateful just to be alive. Then came the knock. A heavy, arrogant knock that echoed through the cabin like a warning. I opened the door, and there stood Trevor, hands in his hoodie pockets, chewing gum, smirking like he'd just pulled a prank. Behind him, Margaret stood with her ever-present clipboard. Her eyes narrowed like she was inspecting my very existence. "Evening," I said slowly, already on edge. "What can I do for you?" Trevor leaned against the doorframe, blowing a bubble. "So here's the deal. Prom's coming up in a couple weeks, and I need a place to throw an after-party. My mom says your cabin would be perfect." I blinked, sure I'd misheard. "Excuse me?" Margaret stepped forward, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "Don't play coy, dear. The cabin is spacious, right on the lake, and far enough from the main road that the kids won't disturb anyone. It's ideal. Trevor needs a venue, and you have one. We'll need the place for one night." Ellen, who'd come up behind me, crossed her arms. "Are you out of your mind? This is our home. You can't just demand to use it like a rental hall." Trevor rolled his eyes. "Come on. It's just one night. You're old. What do you even need it for? We'll bring our own drinks. Clean up after." "No big deal." I could feel my blood pressure rising. "Son, let me make this crystal clear. This is my cabin, my home. It's not some party shack for you and your friends to trash." "Answer's no." Margaret's lips pressed into a thin line. "You don't seem to understand how things work around here. We're part of an association, and the association looks after the community. If the community needs something, it's expected that we cooperate. Refusing could be seen as hostile." Her words dripped with threat. Ellen stepped forward, her voice sharp as glass. "You listen to me, Margaret? This cabin is private property. You and your spoiled son are not setting foot inside it. Not for prom night, not for anything." "Do I make myself clear?" Trevor scoffed. "This is BS, Mom. Just make them do it." Margaret straightened her pearls and gave me a smile that was colder than the lake in winter. "We'll see about that." They turned and marched off, leaving Ellen and me standing in stunned silence. The very next morning, we found an envelope taped to our door. Inside was a notice of violation from the HOA, citing us for having an unapproved structure on our property, the shed out back, the one that had been standing there for 20 years before we ever moved in. I laughed bitterly. "That didn't take long." Ellen frowned. "She's retaliating. She's actually doing this. More notices came over the next week. Complaints about our lawn being too natural. Accusations that our dock wasn't regulation length. Even a claim that our porch light was an eyesore. Each one came with a threat of fines. One afternoon, as I was hammering a loose board on the deck, Trevor pulled up in his shiny truck. He leaned out the window, grinning like a wolf. "Nice cabin you got here, old man. Would be a shame if the HOA decided it wasn't up to code and had to tear it down." I dropped the hammer, my fists tightening. "Are you threatening me?" He shrugged, just saying, "Things could be easier if you cooperated." One night, that's all I want. Before I could answer, he revved the engine and sped off, kicking gravel across my lawn. That night, Ellen and I sat at the kitchen table. The stack of violation notices spread between us. She rubbed her temples. "This is harassment. Pure and simple." I nodded. "And it's only going to get worse if we don't push back." She hesitated, then looked me dead in the eyes. "Maybe it's time we use my badge. You see, Ellen wasn't just my wife. She wasn't just my partner of 40 years. She was also the chief of police in our county, and Margaret had no idea." The next HOA board meeting was held at the community center. Ellen and I showed up, carrying a folder full of documents of the bogus violations, lost copies of bylaws Margaret had ignored, even photos of other homes with the same so-called issues that were never found. When we walked in, Margaret was already seated at the front. Trevor slouched beside her, grinning like he owned the place. As soon as the meeting began, Margaret pounded the gavel. "First order of business, the repeated non-compliance of the residents at 42 Lakeview." "That's us," said loudly, standing up, "and I'd like to respond." She looked irritated. "This is not the time for—" "Oh, it's the perfect time," I interrupted, "because we're tired of your lies." Gasps rippled through the room. Neighbors turned their heads, whispering. I held up the stack of notices. "You fined us for our shed, but half this neighborhood has sheds. You fined us for our dock, but George down the road has the same one. You'll find us for our porch light, when the bylaws don't even mention porch lights. This isn't about rules. This is about you trying to bully us into giving your son our cabin for his prom party." The room erupted in murmurs. Margaret's face went crimson. "That's a baseless accusation." Trevor jumped up, pointing at me. "You're lying." "Can't prove anything?" Ellen rose beside me, her voice calm but commanding. "Actually, we can." She pulled out her badge and held it high for everyone to see. "I'm Chief Ellen Carter, County Police Department." "What have you been doing, Margaret? Isn't just harassment, it's abuse of power and fraud." The room went dead silent. Margaret's jaw dropped. Trevor's smirk vanished. You're a cop." Margaret slammed her. Ellen corrected her, her voice sharp. "Chief and I strongly suggest you stop weaponizing this HOA against innocent people before you find yourself facing charges." The neighbors, who'd been silent for so long out of fear, suddenly broke into applause. George, the old veteran, from down the road, stood up and shouted. It's about time someone stood up to her. Margaret pounded the gavel, flustered. "Meeting adjourned," she barked and stormed out, dragging Trevor by the arm. But I knew this wasn't the end. This was just the beginning. I knew the second Margaret stormed out of that HOA meeting that she wouldn't let it end there. People like her, self-appointed royalty in their little kingdoms, don't take humiliation lightly, especially not in front of their neighbors. And I was right. The very next morning, Ellen and I woke to the sound of hissing. At first I thought it was a busted pipe, but when I stepped outside, I froze. All 4 of our truck's tires had been slashed. Deep, deliberate cuts, the rubber sagging onto the gravel, the kind of damage you couldn't mistake for an accident. Ellen clenched her jaw, her eyes blazing. "Trevor," I kicked the gravel, furious. "The punk thinks he can scare us." Before I could even pull out my phone to call the sheriff's office, Ellen had already dialed. She gave her name, her title, and explained what had happened. Within minutes, a patrol car rolled up, lights flashing. The young deputy stepped out, clearly nervous when he saw Ellen. "Chief Carter." "I didn't expect Ellen cut him off. You're not here for me. You're here because someone vandalized my husband's property. Treat this like any other call." He nodded quickly, pulled out his notepad, and began documenting everything. Photos, statements, the whole 9 yards. I'll never forget the look on Margaret's face when the deputy knocked on her door. She came out with curlers in her hair, feigning shock. "Officer, what a terrible thing to happen. But surely you don't think my Trevor had anything to do with it?" Trevor appeared behind her, smirking. "Yeah, I was home all night. Ask Mom." The deputy gave Ellen a wary glance. She simply folded her arms. "We'll let the evidence do the talking." I knew deep down that Trevor had done it. Margaret was going to cover for him no matter what. 2 days later, just when I thought things might cool down, another knock rattled the cabin door. This time it wasn't Trevor. It was 2 uniformed officers I didn't recognize. "Mr. Carter?" one asked stiffly. "We've received a complaint about you brandishing a firearm and threatening a minor." My stomach dropped. "What? That's insane." "I've done no such thing." So Ellen, who had just stepped out from the kitchen, immediately took over. "Officers, I'm Chief Carter. This is my jurisdiction. Who filed this complaint?" They exchanged nervous glances. "Margaret Wallace. She claims her son Trevor was threatened here 2 nights ago." I laughed bitterly. "Let me guess, around the same time my tires were slashed." The officers looked uncomfortable. Ellen's voice hardened. "These allegations are false. My husband doesn't even own a firearm anymore. I'll be requesting copies of the report immediately, and I expect you to document this as a false claim." The officers nodded, clearly eager to retreat. They left quickly, leaving me seething. "She's escalating," I muttered, pacing. "Psst. The HOA now trying to drag me into criminal charges." Ellen placed a hand on my shoulder. "She's desperate. Desperate people make mistakes, and when she does, we'll be ready." Later that week, as I was repairing the dock, old George, from down the road, shuffled up, leaning on his cane. "Mind if I sit a spell?" he asked. "Of course," I said, brushing sawdust off the bench. He lowered himself down with a grunt. I'd heard what happened at the board meeting. Brave thing, standing up to Margaret. "Most of us have wanted to for years," I sighed. "Brave. Or foolish. I'm not sure which." George leaned closer, his voice dropping. "You should know Margaret's got friends in places you wouldn't expect. She donates big to the county, has her claws in politics. Folks look the other way when she stirs trouble. That's how she's gotten away with bullying us for so long." My jaw tightened. "She's not bullying me anymore." George gave me a grim smile. "Good. Just watch your back. That boy of hers, he's meaner than a rattlesnake. Don't put it past him to do something stupid." The stupid thing came sooner than I thought. It was a sunny Saturday afternoon. Ellen was out on patrol, and I was fishing off the dock, enjoying a rare moment of calm. That's when I heard the rumble of an engine. Trevor's truck rolled up, music blaring. He jumped out with 3 of his buddies, all of them holding beer cans, swaggering like they owned the place. "Hey, old man," Trevor shouted, thought I'd check out my future party spot. I set my fishing pole down slowly. "This isn't your spot. You're trespassing. Leave." One of his friends laughed, taking a swig of beer. "Man, this place is sick. Way better than my basement. We're totally partying here." Trevor grinned, stepping onto the dock. "What are you gonna do, huh? Call Mommy." "Oh, wait. Your wife's the cop. Bet she won't always be around to protect you." Something in me snapped. I stood tall, fists clenched. "You boys have 10 seconds to get off my property before I call in half the department." They hesitated, glancing at each other. One muttered, "Come on, Trev. Maybe we should bail." But Trevor sneered. "Nah, this is ours. He can't stop us." That's when headlights flashed at the end of the drive. Ellen's cruiser pulled up, and she stepped out, her presence commanding the air itself. "What's going on here?" she barked. The boys froze like deer in headlights. Trevor tried to play it cool. "Hey, Chief, just visiting. No harm done." Ellen's eyes were steel. "You're underage, you're drinking, and you're trespassing. Drop the cans, now."
Oh.
Boys scrambled, dropping their beers like they were hot coals. Trevor tried to protest. "This isn't fair. Can't enough," Ellen snapped. "I could haul you in right now, but I'm giving you one chance. "Leave this property and don't come back." They slunk off, muttering under their breaths. But the look Trevor shot me as he climbed into his truck made my blood run cold. It wasn't over, not by a long shot. That night, Ellen and I sat on the porch in silence. The lake shimmered in the moonlight, beautiful and serene, but my heart was heavy. "This was supposed to be our sanctuary," I whispered. "Now it feels like a battleground." Ellen reached over, squeezing my hand. "I know, but bullies like Margaret and Trevor, they thrive on fear. If we give them an inch, they'll take everything. Can't let them win." I looked into her eyes, full of fire and determination. For the first time in weeks, I felt a spark of hope. Maybe, just maybe, I could turn this around. The turning point came the following week. Ellen received an anonymous envelope at the station. O, return address, just a thick manila folder. Inside were copies of HOA financial records, rather, altered financial records. Margins full of scribbled notes, signatures that didn't match. And most damning of all, checks, written directly to Margaret Wallace for administrative costs. Kellen spread the papers across our kitchen table. "Look at this. She's been embezzling from the HOA fund for years." My jaw dropped. This is it. This is how we nail her. But Ellen shook her head. "Not yet. If we confront her now, she'll just deny it. We need to build a case. Solid evidence. Witnesses, a pattern." I nodded slowly, though my blood boiled. "So we wait." Easier said than done, because Margaret and Trevor weren't about to stop harassing us. As prom drew closer, the pressure mounted. Flyers appeared in mailboxes, announcing the official after-party at Lakeview. No address listed, but everyone knew what it meant. Kids started showing up at the lake, scouting the area. Empty beer cans appeared on our lawn. Someone spray-painted the word "loser" on our mailbox in bright red letters. Ellen filed reports, but we both knew who was behind it. Finally, 1 week before prom, Trevor himself showed up again. This time, he didn't come alone. He brought Margaret. They stood on our porch like a king and queen delivering a decree. Margaret's smile was tight, her eyes gleaming with malice. "You've made this far more difficult than it needed to be. But let me spell it out. Either you allow Trevor and his classmates to use your cabin for prom night, or I will see to it that you're fined, harassed, and isolated until you regret ever buying this place." Trevor smirked. "Yeah, we're doing it with or without your permission. Might as well make it easy." I stepped forward, voice trembling with controlled rage. Over my dead body, Ellen rose behind me, her badge glinting under the porch light, and over mine. "You set foot on this property, and I will arrest you both. Do you understand?" For the first time, Margaret's smile cracked. She yanked Trevor back by the arm. "Come on, this isn't over." As they stormed off, Ellen whispered to me, "Let them come. We'll be ready." And in that moment, I realized the stage was set. Prom night wasn't going to be just another high school party. It was going to be war. The days leading up to prom felt like the calm before a storm. Our neighbors were whispering. Kids were driving by slower than usual, and the tension in the air was so thick you could cut it with a knife. Ellen and I kept our routines, but every time I heard the crunch of tires on gravel, my stomach tightened. Ellen, though, was steady as a rock. That's one of the things I love most about her. Where I worry, she plans. Where I react, she strategizes. And this time, she had a plan. 2 nights before prom. She sat me down at the kitchen table, her eyes sharp, her badge glinting in the lamplight. "Listen, Margaret and Trevor are stubborn. They'll try to force their way in, no matter what. We say we can't stop them from showing up, but we can stop them from getting away with it." I frowned. "What are you thinking?" She leaned closer. "We'll treat it like a sting operation. I'll have 2 deputies stationed nearby, plainclothes, ready to step in. The minute those kids trespass, or Margaret does something illegal, we'll nail them. We'll end this once and for all." A slow smile spread across my face. "You're brilliant." What inside, I was still nervous. I wasn't worried about the lie. Knew Ellen had that covered. What I worried about was Trevor. That boy wasn't just spoiled. He was reckless. And reckless kids make dangerous choices. Prom night arrived, warm and clear, the kind of May evening, where the lake sparkled like glass. Ellen and I sat on the porch, coffee mugs in hand, waiting. Around 9 o'clock, headlights appeared on the road, then another pair, then another. One by one, cars started pulling up along the gravel shoulder. Kids spilling out in tuxes and dresses, laughter and music filling the night air. My stomach sank. There must have been 50 of them within 10 minutes. Trevor was the ringleader, of course, swaggering out of his truck in a crisp suit, arm wrapped around some girl in a sequined gown. He strutted down our drive like he owned it. Behind him, Margaret appeared in her pearl necklace and fur stole, looking more like she was attending a gala than her son's prom. Clipboard in hand, she was already barking orders at the kids, directing them like an event planner. I stood at the top of the porch steps. Ellen beside me, both of us stone-faced. Trevor grinned. "Evening, old man. Ready to hand over the keys?" The voice was steel. "This is private property. You are trespassing." Margaret stepped forward, chin high. "Don't be dramatic. These are children celebrating a milestone. Stop being selfish." Ellen flashed her badge. "The law is very clear. This property is ours. If you step foot inside, you'll be arrested." "All of you." The crowd of teenagers went quiet, whispering nervously. A few already began drifting back toward their cars, but Trevor wasn't backing down. He puffed out his chest, glaring at Ellen. "You think you can scare us? But you can't arrest everyone. We're having this party whether you like it or not." He turned to his classmates. "Come on, don't be cowards. Let's go." And with that, the first wave of kids surged forward. Ellen's deputies moved fast. 2 unmarked cars pulled up, red and blue lights suddenly flashing, sirens piercing the night. As officers jumped out, shouting commands, "Stop right there. This is trespassing on private property." The kids froze. Dresses swished, tuxedos shuffled. A few dropped red plastic cups they tried to sneak in, liquid splashing onto the gravel. One officer pointed at Trevor. "You hands where we can." "See them," Trevor sneered. "You can't do this. My mom runs the HOA. She'll have your jobs." Margaret shoved her way forward, face flushed with fury. "This is harassment. These officers are out of line." "I demand." Ellen cut her off, her voice sharp as a whip. "You demand nothing? Margaret Wallace, you've harassed this neighborhood for years. You have financial records showing you've been embezzling HOA funds. You have multiple reports of you filing false claims against residents. And tonight, you're endangering minors by organizing an illegal underage drinking party." Gasps rippled through the crowd. The kids, wide-eyed, started backing away from Margaret like she was radioactive. Margaret's face twisted. "You can't prove," but Ellen was ready. She pulled a folder from under her arm and held it high. "I have sworn statements. Have bank records. I have everything I need to charge you." The officers moved in, cuffing Margaret as she shrieked, her pearls rattling. "You'll regret this. You'll all regret this." Trevor lunged forward, shouting, "Get your hands off my mom!" That's when one of the deputies grabbed him, 2, pinning his arms as he kicked and screamed. "This isn't fair. I was supposed to be the king tonight?" The kids scattered, some crying, some laughing nervously. Most just trying to get away before their parents found out they'd almost been arrested. In the flashing lights, the mighty HOA queen and her spoiled prince looked a lot smaller than they ever had before. It was past midnight by the time the last patrol car pulled away. The lake was quiet again, the moon casting a silver path across the water. Ellen and I sat on the porch, exhausted but relieved. I let out a long breath. "Oh, that's one prom night nobody's going to forget." Ellen chuckled softly, resting, her head on my shoulder, "and one HOA president who won't be running any more meetings." Sure enough, Margaret was removed from her position within days. Word spread fast about the embezzlement, the harassment, the arrest. She and Trevor moved out quietly not long after, their house put up for sale. The neighborhood changed almost overnight. People smiled again. Kids played without fear of being scolded. Neighbors came by with pies and thank yous, grateful that someone had finally stood up to the tyranny. One evening George came by, cane tapping the porch steps. He settled into a chair beside me and sighed. Never thought I'd see the day Margaret Wallace got what she deserved. You two did this neighborhood a service. I smiled, feeling lighter than I had in months. We just wanted peace. Now maybe we'll finally have it. Ellen reached over, squeezing my hand. And next prom night, maybe we'll just stick to fishing. We laughed, the sound carrying across the water. For the first time since we'd bought the cabin, I felt like it was truly ours. It's not just a house, not just a property, but a home. The morning after prom, I woke up to birdsong and the faint smell of coffee drifting through the cabin. Ellen was already up, standing at the stove, hair pulled back, wearing that old flannel shirt she liked best. She looked calm, serene, even, but I could still see the weight of the night before in her eyes. I slid into a chair at the kitchen table and rubbed my temples. Do you think it's finally over? She poured me a mug of coffee and set it down in front of me. It's just beginning. Margaret isn't going to charm her way out of this one. The DA already called me this morning. They're moving forward with charges. I let out a low whistle. About time. Ellen leaned against the counter, crossing her arms. Fraud. Conspiracy. Endangerment of minors. She's looking at years, not months. I stared at my coffee for a moment, steam curling up into the sunlight. You know, I thought when we moved here, it would be quiet, peaceful. I never imagined we'd be in the middle of something like this. She came over, placing a hand on my shoulder. That's life, isn't it? You don't get to pick your battles. Sometimes they come to your doorstep. I reached up and covered her hand with mine. Lucky for me, I married a fighter. Within days, the neighborhood buzzed with gossip. Word about Margaret's arrest traveled faster than wildfire. At the Little General store by the main road, I overheard whispers as I picked up some milk. Did you hear? They found she was skimming off HOA funds for years. And to think we all paid those ridiculous dues without question. She bullied everyone. Maybe now we can finally breathe. People weren't afraid anymore. They smiled at me, shook my hand, some even hugged me. For the first time since we moved to the lake, I felt truly welcomed. George came over that afternoon with a bottle of bourbon under his arm. He set it down on our porch table with a grin. Figured you and the chief might want a drink to celebrate. Ellen chuckled, uncorking the bottle. You just want an excuse to drink on a Tuesday afternoon? George shrugged, lowering himself into a chair with a groan. Oh, that too. As we sipped, George grew quiet, staring out at the water. I lived under that woman's thumb for years. Do you know she'll once find me for having the wrong shade of blue on my shutters? Said it clashed with the community aesthetic. I laughed. Sounds about right. He turned to me, his voice soft. You two did what none of us had the courage to do. You stood up to her. For all of us. His words sank deep. I hadn't thought of it like that. To me, it was just protecting our home, our peace. But to the others, it was freedom. If Margaret's downfall was dramatic, Trevor's was tragic. He wasn't arrested that night, juvenile. Laws protected him, but the damage was done. The school suspended him for the rest of the semester. His college admissions evaporated once news of his antics hit social media. And his so-called friends, they abandoned him the moment the party crumbled. One evening, about a week after prom, I saw him across the street, slumped on the hood of his truck. He looked smaller somehow, defeated for a moment. I almost felt sorry for him, almost. But then I remembered his arrogance, his threats, the way he'd tried to shove his way into our lives. Sympathy only went so far. Later, Ellen told me he and Margaret were moving in with her sister 2 towns over. Can't show their faces around here anymore, she said matter-of-factly. And just like that, the lake was free of them. With Margaret gone, the HOA crumbled. Within weeks, the board voted to dissolve it entirely. The remaining funds were redistributed to homeowners, and for the first time in decades, people here were free from its grip. I'll never forget the first Saturday after the news broke. Families came out with lawn chairs and picnic baskets. The kids played frisbee in yards that had once been ruled by approved landscaping ordinances. Someone brought a grill, and before long, half the neighborhood gathered on our shore. laughing, eating, and sharing stories. It felt like a weight had lifted not just from us, but from everyone. One woman, a widow named Carol, pulled me aside. Tears shimmered in her eyes. "You don't know what this means?" She threatened to take my house once because I couldn't afford to repaint the trim. I thought I'd lose everything. I hugged her, my throat tight. No one should ever feel that way in their own home. That night, as the sun dipped behind the trees and fireflies blinked over the water, Ellen leaned against me with a soft smile. "This is what community is supposed to look like." I nodded, heart swelling. For the first time, it truly felt like we belonged. Months passed and life settled into something resembling peace. I fished in the mornings, worked on small repairs around the cabin, sat with Ellen on the porch every evening as the lake turned gold with sunset. But sometimes, when I thought back on it all, I still felt the sting, the anger, the fear. I remembered standing nose to nose with Trevor, hearing him demand my cabin like it was his right. I remembered Margaret's smug smile as she threatened lawsuits, fines, humiliation. And then I remembered the flashing lights, the cuffs, clicking shut, the way the community stood a little taller afterward. It struck me then that sometimes the battles we don't choose become the most important ones. This wasn't just about keeping a cabin. It was about protecting a way of life, about saying no to bullies, no matter how powerful they seem, about standing your ground, even when the odds are stacked against you. It was late summer when I saw Margaret again. Ellen and I had driven into town for groceries. As we walked back to the truck, I spotted her across the street, climbing out of a beat-up sedan. Gone was the fur stole, the pearls, the air of superiority. She wore plain jeans and a faded sweater, her hair tied back, her face tired and drawn. For a moment our eyes met. She froze, clutching her bag. I waited for the venom, the glare, the trademark Karen sneer, but instead she looked away, almost ashamed. It was strange seeing her like that, human, small. I didn't speak, neither did Ellen. We just got into the truck and drove away. And in that silence, I realized something. Margaret Wallace no longer mattered. She had no power here, no hold over us. She was just another person who'd made her bed and now had to lie in it that night. Ellen and I sat on the dock, our feet dangling in the water. The moon shimmered across the lake, and the air was cool and still. She leaned against me, her voice quiet. "You know, I think we finally found it." "Found what?" I asked home. She said simply. I smiled, feeling the truth of it settle deep in my chest. The battles were over. The cabin was safe. The community was free. And through it all, Ellen and I had grown stronger, closer. It's more certain than ever that together, we could face anything. As I wrapped an arm around her and listened to the gentle lap of water against the shore, I realized something else too. Life at the lake might not always be peaceful, but it was ours, and that made it worth every fight. A year later, I got a letter in the mail. It was from Carol, the widow. What about how the neighborhood had transformed? How kids now played in the streets without fear of being scolded. How neighbors looked out for one another instead of spying and reporting. At the bottom, she'd scrawled one last line: "Thank you for giving us our lives back." I set the letter down, tears stinging my eyes. Maybe we hadn't set out to be heroes. Maybe we just wanted peace. But in standing up to Margaret and Trevor, we'd done something bigger. We'd reminded people of their power. We'd proven that no bully, no matter how loud or entitled, could take away what truly mattered. And for that, I'd always be grateful.